And good morning. Thank you for joining me this morning in the next edition of MARC From Scratch. We are doing the board game edition today. The agenda is pretty simple. We are going to look at the MARC template that we can use to build a record, and then we are going to use it to catalog a board game. This cataloging resources page keeps getting longer and longer because I'm finding more and more that are useful, and then also ones that are useful specific to each edition. So on the left side are the resources that are just useful in general. Like, of course, we have our specific cataloging procedures guide, MARC 21 format for bib records from Library of Congress, and OCLC, a link to the cataloging playlist on the Evergreen Indiana YouTube or training YouTube channel, useful websites for catalogers, and a link to the ISBD Consolidated Edition, the 2021 update. On the right are the links that I used to help build this webinar. So I have Library of Congress classification information, slides or other presentations from other librarians across the states who have presented on cataloging games for their libraries, and then a link to the genre terms for tabletop games, which was created by the University of North Texas. So these are all linkable and available for you. And I will add some of these to that useful websites for catalogers page. So before we start, I always want to go over what to expect formatting wise when we are dealing with the enhanced MARC editor and the flat text editor within the web client. In the enhanced MARC editor, when we are dealing with undefined indicators, they are represented by blanks. So these will remain blank. And then the delimiters are represented by the double cross or the double daggers. Whereas in the flat text editor, we use backward slashes, 2 of them, to indicate undefined indicators. And then the delimiters are represented by dollar signs. The subfield samples in these slides are written in flat text format. And then when we look at each tag and subfield codes, not all of the indicators and subfield codes are listed for each of them. First, we need to pull up a MARC template because, again, that is one of the main points of today. When we know we have to create a record from scratch, we can use the MARC templates, and we access them from the cataloging top navigation menu and then clicking create new MARC record. So let's do that right now. I'm using the migration server, or also AKA MIG server, because I don't want to accidentally create a new record. So I'm going to click new MARC record. And now we need to select the template. From the dropdown, we want to select the template that best matches our item in hand. We do have a lot of them, but we don't have a template for each and every item format. If you don't see a template for your item, select the one that best matches the closest, and then just modify it to work with yours. I've heard some catalogers use the music CD template and then just adjust it for the vinyl records that they are cataloging. Once you've selected the template from the dropdown, we click load. The set workstation default option allows us to automatically select a specific template from the list upon loading the screen. So if you only catalog DVDs for your library, then it might be beneficial to select the template that best matches. So your video DVD. So you'll select that set workstation as default, and it should just automatically be entered here. And today we are using the Realia game template. And this template is fairly small when we compare it to other records, but it does still give us a good place to start. So let me bring that up in our MIG load. All right, here we go. So we have the some tags that are pre-entered with data to get us started. Of course, we have those 3x fields that are pre-filled, which is always useful. And then other fields that are common. And then, of course, we have the fixed fields that we do want to make sure we update. So today's cataloging subject is the board game called Really Loud Librarians, a merciless word shouting board game. The front cover of the box gives us some information, including the title, subtitle. It also includes some notes like audience notes about playtime and players, and it gives us publisher information. The back cover gives us the title, some audience notes, publication information, contents, and other identifying information. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will get to them as soon as I see them. The contents is all of that. I don't want to go through all of them specifically, but I chose this game because I didn't want to just choose a deck of cards, but I also didn't want to choose something like Ticket to Ride in terms of the amount of contents that we would have to catalog. This is a list of tags that are required to create a core level bibliographic record. It is the equivalent of entering a 7 in the encoding level fixed field. We always want to strive for full level bibliographic records. I have included the link to the Library of Congress MARC 21 national level full and minimal requirements for bib records if you'd like to take a look. For today, we are focusing on the list provided in the Evergreen, Indiana Cataloging Procedures Guide with a little bit of added data. All right, let's get started. So the 024 is the other standard identifier tag. This is used when a standard number is published on an item that can't be accommodated in another field, such as the 020, which is the International Standard Book Number or ISBN. For the other standard identifier, we have several different first indicator codes that allow us to define what the number is. A first indicator of 1 denotes that it is the UPC, Universal Product Code, which is probably the most common that we will find. We have the International Standard Music Number and the EAN, or International Article Number. Second indicator is the difference indicator. So what this means is we normally have a barcode and then the number beneath it or above it. When we scan that barcode, is it going to match what that written out number is? If it does match, then we would enter a 0 in the second indicator as no difference. If it is different, then we would enter a 1. And then we have a couple subfields here listed of what we might use. So the subfield A, which is where we would enter the identifying number, and then a subfield Q for qualifying information. Now, since we have a clear indication that the number with the barcode from the container itself is an international number, we will enter a 3 in the first indicator of the 024. And then after some Googling, when I originally scanned the barcode, the 0 at the beginning of the EAN was not appearing. So I did a little Googling because, we have like Excel that drops leading zeros. And it seems like many scanners may disregard a leading 0 during a scan. So I used my maybe best judgment and decided that we could probably safely say that the scanned number does match the EAN number below it. So we would enter a 0 in the second indicator. And then in the subfield A, we would enter that number, no spaces or dashes if they were in the on the container. So let's go in here, and I'm probably going to mistype it, but also let me, because I can't go back and forth. So we have a 0, 2, 4. I'm going to enter a 3 in the first indicator, a 0, and then in subfield A, oh, A1, A3. Okay. Now, don't necessarily need qualifying information for this because it is a single item on this record. It's going to be very specific. So a qualifying subfield Q is not really necessary for this. Remember, in the core, we require at least one classification number. I decided to go a little fancy and look for a Library of Congress column number. But since board games aren't normally cataloged by the Library of Congress, I wanted to see if I could find another record or cataloger that has assigned one to the game. So the 050 tag is the Library of Congress call number, which is where what is entered, the call number that is taken from the Library of Congress classification. The first indicator is used to tell us whether or not the item exists in the Library of Congress collection. If it is in the Library of Congress, I'd say catalog, you would enter a 0 or a 1 if it is not in the catalog. Or if there's no information provided, you can leave it blank. Second indicator, you can use a 0 if the source of the call number if it was assigned by the Library of Congress, or a 4 if it was assigned by someone else. And then we use subfields A and B for the classification number and item number. So I found the classification number from another catalog or another MARC record, but I wasn't really sure how they reached that number. So by using the Library of Congress Classification Schedule G document and the cutter numbers data, I was able to piece together how they built it. So the first indicator, we are going to leave blank. And since the call number was assigned by someone other than the Library of Congress, we will enter a 4 in the second indicator. In the subfield A, we enter the classification number, which in this instance stands for guessing games parties. And the subfield B is where we actually enter the item number or the cutter number. So based on this cutter table, they entered R because really is the first word in the title and it starts with an R. So based on that, we have after other initial consonants, for the second letter, use number 4 and E. And then they have, of course, then they followed the rest to get the R435. And then we end it with the year it was published, or maybe it was copyright date. That part I wasn't specifically sure about, but this is how they built that, and this is how it will appear in the MARC record in that subfield A and B. So I'm going to see, I didn't write any of this down in my slides, so I don't. So I know you can't see what I'm doing, but I will show you. Okay. I'll figure this will be a little easier later. So we added, instead of an 8082, which is included in the template, I removed that and changed it to a 050. I'm leaving the first indicator blank. We want that 4 in the second. And then I entered that classification number in the subfield A. And then in the subfield B is where we enter the item number, which includes that period. $245 field is the title statement and also where we enter statement of responsibility. So the title statement will include the title proper And also in our case, we'll include the remainder of the title, or we also call it the subtitle and the statement of responsibility. Um, since we do not have a 1XX entry in the record, we are using a 0 in the first indicator because there is no added entry. There's no 1X entry in this record. And for the second indicator is where we enter non-filing characters. Since the title does not start with a, an, or the, or no beginning articles, we can enter a 0. In the title statement for subfield A, we want to use sentence case. And we are taking it from the chief source of information, which is the container for the game. And we always want to make sure we transcribe it as it is, except with the sentence case. So if you looked at the cover of this container, the title was in all capital letters. Now, while we do transcribe that in sentence case, we would still want to include any misspellings or diacritics that were in that. And then if there were any misspellings, we could use the 246 field to fix that. The subfield B is where we will enter the remainder of the title or the subtitle. And then in the subfield C is the statement of responsibility. So the first indicator and second indicators will have zeros, and then we will use these subfield A's, B's, and C to enter that data. So let's go in here, 24500. So really loud librarian. It's hard to type when people are watching. And then since we have a subfield or a subtitle, I'm going to enter replace that / with a colon and add a subfield B. Okay, so that, and then now the subfield C is preceded by a / and now we are going to enter the statement of responsibility. And on the front cover, it says a game by Exploding Kittens. All right, so we have our 245 field ready to go. 264 is used for production, publication, distribution, manufacture, and copyright notice information. The first indicator is usually blank because it's the sequence of statements. It's usually not applicable or it's the earliest release. The second indicator is where we define the function of the entity. We usually stick with a 1 for publication, so we will use a 1 in that second indicator. And then the subfields A, B, and C are where we will enter the location that the place of production publication. In subfield B, the name of the publisher, and then the C is the date of the publication. Now, on the back, we have the copyright 2022 by the company. I'm going to try not to say Exploding Kittens a whole lot. It is made in China, but the Exploding Kittens publisher is located in Los Angeles. So for the subfield A, we will enter Los Angeles, California. Subfield B, we will enter that publisher name. And then here we have a copyright date of 2022, but there's no published date. So we can infer that the publication date is going to be the same as the copyright date. But since it's not on the item, we need to enter the pub date in brackets in the subfield C. And when we use brackets, we need to make sure we add a second 264 field with a second indicator of 4 for copyright, and then enter that copyright date in a subfield C. The subfield C, when you are dealing with the 264 subfield second indicator 4 for copyright, it does not end in a terminal period. So we would just have the copyright symbol or a C if you might not remember the copyright Alt key, which is holding the Alt key and then 0169, and then enter the copyright year. And also, while we're here, before I forget again, let's go ahead and update some of our fixed fields. So we know our country is going to be California, so CAU. Let me make this a little bigger. We haven't gotten to the other things yet, so I'm going to update this. Since the item is using the abbreviation for California, we can just enter it as such. Publisher name, and then brackets 2022. And then this is already in here, so now we will just enter that. All right. I think we are. Let me get rid of this. Okay, next we look at the 300 tag, or the physical description. This is where we describe the extent of the material, the dimensions, how big is the box that the game is in, and then any of the accompanying material. We always want to make sure that the 300 tag matches the item. And so when we enter it, we are usually, like with books, we want to make sure we take into consideration all number of pages. When we are dealing with like tabletop games or things with like multiple pieces, we always want to take into consideration all of those pieces. The first and second indicators for these are blank, and then we are going to use the A, B, and C subfields to help expand our contents. The template does have this format for the 300, but what I have found with other records and presentations, a lot of them use this format for the 300. So they have, in this one, they have like X amount of like playing board, pieces, cards, dice, etc. Whereas here, it's telling us there is one game. There's one game in this box, and then in parentheses is where we spread out that of the different pieces in that container, in that game. So for that, we leave those indicators blank. And then in the subfield A, we enter the one game. And then thankfully, it's all written out on a number of the places on the container and in the instructions. So we just enter all of that into the parentheses in the subfield A. And then we can enter in a subfield B, is where we describe basically what this game is made out of. And what I can find is there is cardboard and plastic that makes up the container and the game pieces and all of that. So I entered the cardboard and plastic. There was a question, do you also put this information in a 505 field? I don't see why not. I don't know if it's necessary or required, but you could, or it might just be in a, yeah, it might just be in a basic 505. But there's no requirement, at least like core wise, or anything that I have found that they have this. I have seen in other records of ours in our catalog that they do use a 505. So if you want to add one, feel free. Don't remove it if there is one. I think that's probably the best way to go about it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip over that, adding that 300, because that's going to take me a while to retype. So I wanted to not really break down the 33X fields, but leave them in here. For the content type, for the tabletop game, for the Realia game, we are using a 3-dimensional form term. And remember, the 33X fields, or a lot of the RDA tags, use controlled vocabulary, and that is, you can access that from the RDA value vocabularies list. So we have the content type, which is what we just talked about, RDA media type, that's the 337, and carrier, that is for the 33A, and you'll be able to see some of these others, like RDA font size. If you remember, in large print material, we have that 340 with a subfield and large print, and then that subfield 2 for the source code is RDAFS. That stands for RDA font size. So that large print term was retrieved from this vocabulary. So it get that that's basically how we get that terminology. 337 is unmediated, so because there's no media part in this container, and then in the carrier type we are using object. And do remember, a lot of, while the how was I going to say this? A lot of our templates, or all of our templates, already have these in the 33Xs in the records, which is great. And a lot of them, if not all of them, include the what they call it, the abbreviation of the carrier, like in this, the carrier type, but the subfield B is not required. So if you have to add the 33X fields to your record and you can't find what to enter into the subfield B, don't worry about it. Make sure, but you do want to make sure you include the subfield A and 2 if you are taking that vocabulary from a specific controlled vocabulary. Now, a 380 isn't required to include on tabletop game records unless it's known that there's something out there that shares the same title. I didn't really look to see if there were any other games or anything called Really Loud Librarian, so I wouldn't be surprised. But since the original record in our catalog for this game had a 380, I figured we could just include it in the presentation. So the 380 is the form of work. This is a class or genre to which a work belongs. We use usually two different subfields for the 380, which is a subfield A, which is where we enter the form of work, and the subfield 2 is where we enter the source of the term. OLAC, or the Online Audiovisual Catalogers Group, recommends that we take the term that we use in the subfield A from a controlled vocabulary, like the Library of Congress genre form thesaurus. The subfield A is repeatable when terms used are from a shared thesaurus. But if the terms are from separate thesauri, then we want to use separate 380 fields for each term. We leave the indicators blank, and now I kind of looked this. I tried to look this up. There's no rule that I found that says we have to use something like a genre or form heading. It's just recommended that we use a controlled vocabulary and then enter the source in a subfield 2. So I believe in the original record, they use board games from the Library of Congress subject headings. But because to me, board games, this is a board game. It's not about board games. I prefer to take it from a genre form thesaurus. So that is why I entered the board games and then used subfield 2 to enter the LCGFT, which stands for the Library of Congress genre form terms. If available for tabletop games, we will want to include title source information, number of players, playing time, and other notes in the 500 fields, which is for general notes. Indicators are undefined, and most notes for 500 general are just held in the subfield A. I wanted to hold on, back scratch. So the title source, I had heard somewhere that we always wanted to include the source of the title, regardless of if it's from the chief source. So I wanted to do a little digging on that to confirm. So according to RDA, we do want to include a note on the source from which the title proper is taken if it is not one of the sources. So like the title page, which is why we don't see title sources from books or like for books, title sheet or title card, or the title frame or title screen of a manifestation consisting of moving images. So if we actually put that DVD in a DVD player and saw that title frame appear. And also, there is an optional omission. If the manifestation has only a single title and the title appears on the manifestation itself, do not record the source from which the title proper is taken. However, if we click on, I clicked on this little green box, which is tells us the practice for the Library of Congress or the PCC practice for optional omission. So the Library of Congress says, do not do this. So because of that, I included the title source in a 500 field. We will leave the indicators blank, and then I just entered in a subfield A, title from container. We want to add a second 500 field to include the number of players. So we will enter what appears on the item in a subfield A. Do allow for like varying forms. So if someone enters number of players and then colon and then adds that, I mean, of course, that's perfectly fine. Playing time, again, the container notes the approximate duration of play. So we will enter that in the subfield A. Since just entering the term 20 minutes might seem confusing, and how these subfields are viewed in the OPAC, I recommend preceding the note, if it comes like this, like just 20 minutes, with duration of play. Because since it's just a general note, it's not going to precede the actual like subfield A with a playing time. So you will have to add that to the subfield A for it to appear. 500, we can also include other notes. This was, that might be important to include. So I included the choking hazard warning in another 500 field in a subfield A. Uh, 520 is our summary. This is just unformatted information that describes the scope and general contents of the materials. For the first indicator, this is the display constant. We leave it blank when we are dealing with summaries. Second indicator is undefined, and then we want to enter our summary in a subfield A and use a subfield C if there is an assigning source. Since I took the summary verbatim from the item, I'm going to use quotation marks and then use a subfield C to note the source. We do precede the subfield C with a double dash. And there's no space in between the double dash. I just did that. Otherwise, Google will just make it a giant hyphen. Target audience note. We noted that the container includes the interest age level. So we want to include a 521 target audience note to describe that information. We also want to use this in tandem with the required audience fixed field. So we have the first indicator, which tells us what the display constant is going to be. We are going to use a 1 for the interest grade level. And then second indicator is undefined. So first indicator of 1, blank second indicator. And then here we have ages 8 plus. So I entered that in the subfield. I have been kind of ignoring this, but we would ages 8 plus, and then make sure that when you enter any like age information that you also update the audience fixed field. So I would probably, since this is for, you probably could say all ages. I would say this is probably general because adults have fun playing it too. So, and it's nothing besides the age 8 plus, it's pretty broad. So I think general would be the best audience for that. All right. So let's look at the topical and genre form headings for the game. Topical term, which is the subject added entry in which the entry element is a topical term. We have the first indicator, which is the level of subject, as that is primarily left blank. Second indicator tells us what thesaurus we are taking that established heading from. A lot of times you will see a 0 for the Library of Congress subject headings thesaurus, but these are the other available codes for the second indicator. If you are taking the heading from a thesaurus not listed here, we want to use a second indicator of 7 and then enter that source specified in the subfield 2, which is why you see a lot of subfield 2s for like genre form headings, because that thesaurus is not listed here. So we use that second indicator of 7. Our procedures guide states that we require at least 1 or 2 subject headings from a Library of Congress established thesaurus or subject heading system. So since most of the headings I wanted to use, I felt were more genre or form headings, I chose to use BISAC headings for the 650 topical terms. So for both of these, we would have a first indicator blank and a second indicator of 7. And then using the BISAC thesaurus website, I entered the everything in a subfield A. Remember, the major or the highest maybe category is in all capital letters before the first forward slash, and then everything is just capitalized from there. And then in the subfield 2, we enter the source code, which is BISACSH for BISAC. For genre form index terms, these are terms in the 655. These are terms indicating the genre, form, and or physical characteristics of the materials being described. The first indicator is usually blank for basic because we are usually only using a single subfield A. The thesaurus does use all of the other codes that the other established heading tags use. I just only listed these 3 for this slide. So if you could still have a, let's go back to that, a 5 for a Canadian subject heading or a 2 for medical subject headings. But in this case, I just left a 0, 1, and 7. So the 655, I grabbed a couple of them. So I have these genre form terms for board games, which is the broad term. I narrowed it down a little to word puzzles and games. And then I added our own Evergreen, Indiana local genre form term of library of things. So all of these will have a blank first indicator and a second indicator of 7. And then the board games and word puzzles and games I took from the LCGFT, so I'll add that in a subfield 2. And then the library of things has a subfield 2 of EGING. The 710 corporate name is the added entry in which the entry element is a corporate name. This is where we will enter added entries for contributors or creators that were not mentioned in a like 1XX field. A lot of times we'll see this more with video discs where we have all of these people listed in a statement of responsibility and a subfield C245 tag. And also the 508 and 511s. But for us, for our purposes today, we only have one. We have the publisher. So According to, for the 710, the first indicator, we enter a 2 because we are entering their name in direct order. I am including the relator term publisher because, I mean, it's just a qualifying information or a relator term, but also we know there is a game called Exploding Kittens. So the relator term also helps differentiate between those two. If there are there any questions? And as you type, I'm going to try to add data to the record because I kind of feel bad for kind of forgetting to add this. So please type as I do this. Yes, thank you. I do need to enter dates in the fixed field. Thank you so much. And that's also a good thing we can look at. So we entered the country information and the audience. Another common, or since these are already filled out in the templates, but good things to point out, for the type fixed field, we are using an R for a three-dimensional artifact or naturally occurring object. So for tabletop games, we will enter an R for type. For the TMAT or type of material, there is not a thing or a drop down. So we use a G for basically for game. That is what we enter for that. Okay, next. So the time is going to be NNN. And let me bring up that. Let's bring up the bit formats and standards because OCLC just lists the fixed field information so much better than I can find on the Library of Congress page. So let's look at the TMAT real quick. This is the type of visual material. There are quite a few codes for different, for what you are dealing with. So let's trying to scroll down slow enough that it's not making your head spin, but also fast enough. So a G for game. This is items or sets of items designed for play according to prescribed rules and intended for recreation or instruction, which includes puzzles or simulations and game, like tabletop games. For time, we would enter, we don't use like the duration of play. Where did I put it? We would just enter the three ends to denote not applicable. So that's why I entered the 3 ends. The tech we will leave, we could probably leave or use an N for not applicable because there's no like technique. Dates, we want to change this to a publication date and copyright date because we have the publisher date in brackets and the copyright date. So I'm going to enter 2022 and then 2022 as well in the date 2. So even though they are the same date, we want to add them because the publisher date is actually unknown. It is implied that it is 2022. So we want to make sure we do both of those. Question, do you make a new record if your library repackages them? Also the 300 field. Yes, that is just, so it'll be just one game, all of the contents. We're just going to do that. So if your library repackages them, I don't think you would need a new, like, are you like if maybe the box broke and so it's everything is the same, you're just using a different box or like putting it on a big like baggie or something. I don't think you would need to make a new record for that. You would just want to note maybe like an item alert or include a note saying that it is in new packaging. Let's go back to that 300. So you can see what I would, oh, from here I can just copy and paste. When you, if you copy and paste like this, the font will change when you actually save. So don't worry if it looks super weird, except it's not going to. You know, Flat text editor sometimes is a lot easier to deal with than, which is why I'm just going to do this. Haha. All right, so we have the 300 in there. 650 we decided was going to be those BISAC headings. So I'm just going to kind of cheat a little. I wouldn't say it's cheating. I think it's being resourceful. So we have that, and then equals 650. First indicator blank, subfield, second indicator 7. Board games. All right, I think I'm just going to leave that warning out. So this is our record, give or take 1 or 2 fields. That is there. Are there any other questions? So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay warm, but enjoy the sunshine.